trace back your experience. Take the experience of perception. The objects are on one end, yeah, the end out there. What is on the other end of your attention? Trace it back. Don't think about it. Don't refer to what you've read or what you know or what you're afraid of. Trace it back, like walking physically along a path. It's that experiential. Trace it back to the source of your attention or perception. What do you find there? Exactly. That's what you call I. You don't find anything. You don't find anything. You don't find a body or a mind or a world. But nevertheless, your experience of that is absolutely real. Perception is taking place. Objects are on one end of it. What is on the other end?
I call that the perceiver, but I guess
it's the perceiver. But if you ask what is that perceiver, you don't find anything.
It's a point, which is nothing.
It's a point, but in fact, it's not even a point. A point is the best the mind can do.
Right, it's an idea, right? Okay.
The mind is struggling to call it something. So in its own language of objectivity, it says it's a point. You're right, it's a point. But actually, to go a little further, it's a point that has no dimension. Has no dimension in time or space. It's a dimensionless point. Now, go back to what you are perceiving. Doesn't it all appear in that dimensionless point?
I can't honestly say I know the difference, so I could say yes.
The difference between
it being separate, a point and the perceiving.
Exactly. That's the next stage. It's not this apparent world of four dimensions is not only appearing in. First of all, it appears to that dimensionless point. The dimensionless point seems to be on one end, and the four-dimensional world on the other end. And then we realize, no, it's closer than that. It's appearing in. This four-dimensional reality is appearing in this dimensionless empty point. But you're right, it's even more than that. The only substance present in this four-dimensional world of time and space is this dimensionless, empty, aware point. That's the stuff it's made of. As a concession to the vastness of physical space, the teaching sometimes says awareness is vast. In other words, it's even bigger than the physical world because it contains the physical world. The teaching says awareness is vast or borderless. Awareness is not vast or borderless. It's dimensionless. It has no dimensions. But the mind cannot think of no dimensions. So as a concession to the mind, the teaching says it is vast. It is everlasting. It is neither vast nor everlasting. The mind literally cannot go there. That's why it's not possible to think about consciousness. The best we could do would be to think of a blank empty space. But even that is a subtle object, a blank object. If we truly try to think of consciousness, thought comes to an end, and consciousness stands revealed.
My conundrum was nothing was real, and that was terrifying. And then it feels like the counter to that is everything is real.
Absolutely. Nothing is real in the way it is normally conceived. The world is an illusion. Only Brahman is real. Brahman is the world. The beauty of this consciousness-only model is, one, not only is it Does it stand the scrutiny of reason? But it is in line, it doesn't appeal to anything outside our experience. We don't have to invent a new substance that nobody has or could ever find, matter, and believe that what we experience is made of this stuff called matter, and moreover the consciousness with which we know our experience is derived from this matter. Science, as it is practiced now, will never know the nature of reality because it is founded upon this presumption that there is something outside consciousness. That presumption is never verifiable because it is not possible to know something outside consciousness. Has anybody here ever had an experience that took place outside consciousness? Has anybody, any of the 7 billion of us, or the 7 trillion of us, if we include all the animals, had an experience that took place outside consciousness? Has anybody ever visited a place outside consciousness? You know all the early explorers, Marco Polo, and all these people, the explorers who explored every corner of the earth, always finding new territory. And they came back and they reported what they had found. Has anybody, for a moment, left the field of consciousness and come back and said, I found something outside consciousness? Has anybody ever reported such an experience? Could anybody ever find such a thing? No. It's not possible because whatever we know or experience is known or experienced in consciousness, and everything that appears in consciousness is made of consciousness. Therefore, the belief that there is something outside consciousness, called matter, and then the additional belief that this substance called matter, at some late stage in its evolution, generates consciousness, is an absurd and untenable and unverifiable belief. I think scientists are on the verge, I think science on the whole is on the verge of this discovery.
From an individual perspective, it all makes sense to me. I just still have trouble with thinking about the world when there aren't people to be conscious of it. I've obviously missed something crucial.
You've got a foot in both camps. You're presuming that when we do see the world, when we do perceive the world, it exists. And you're therefore having a difficulty with accepting the possibility that when we don't perceive the world, it ceases to exist. This seems impossible, and you're right. If when we perceive the world exists, then how could that existent world possibly disappear simply on account of the fact that we no longer perceive it? It's an intolerable proposition. So the problem is, it can be resolved like this. Not only does the world as we normally think of it exist when it is not perceived, I'm afraid the world as we normally conceive of it doesn't exist when it is perceived. If the world existed as it seems to exist when it is perceived, then it would be inconceivable that simply closing my eyes and the pre-existing world disappears. It cannot be so. However, we presume that when we perceive the world exists in the way that we normally think that it exists, something that is 13.8 billion years old, something that is made out of solid, dense, inert stuff called matter. Of course, that kind of a world doesn't disappear when we close our eyes. What you have to see is that your question is based on an assumption. I understand that you're open to these ideas, but underneath these ideas, there is still this materialist presumption that the world is the way it seems to be. And as a result, you think this world could not possibly disappear when it is not being perceived. It reminds me of the story that Shankaracharya used to tell about there were two colonies of ants. One of them lived on a mountain made of sugar, and the other lived on a mountain made of salt. And one day, one of the ants that lived on the sugar mountain strayed into the territory of the ants that lived on the salt mountain and explained to them that there is something called sweetness. And the ants on the salt mountain just couldn't conceive of the possibility. So the sugar mountain ant invited a delegation of ants from the salt mountain to come to his mountain to taste the sugar. So the ants conferred amongst themselves and they agreed to go, but they thought, we'll be gone for a long time, and what happens if it's not true? What happens if there is no such thing as sugar? We better take some salt with us. So they each tucked a grain of salt into their mouth, and they made, unbeknown to the sugar mountain, and they made the journey to the sugar mountain. They got there, and with great ceremony, they were each presented a grain of sugar to taste. They all tasted it. They conferred amongst themselves, and they said, no, this tastes like salt. So you still have a grain of salt in your mouth.
Clearly.
I don't mean that you personally. The materialistic worldview has been so profoundly inculcated into our minds, into the way we think and feel, that I have known people who have a deep understanding of non-duality and have been studying and practicing non-duality for 40 years, but still, at the core of their thinking and feeling, there is this materialistic view. It's not just one day we just give up the belief in matter. It's not like that. It has infiltrated all our thoughts and feelings. It's very deep, and it takes time to really expose and excavate this materialistic worldview that we've all been brought up with. So I don't mean to criticize you or to imply that you are somehow failing to understand this. You're being very honest. It is a huge leap to even to be open to the possibility, as everybody is here, that what we experience as the world may not be a thing, that there may be no things in existence, that there might just be consciousness and its activity. And the world is what that activity looks like from a separate point of view. If I were to suggest you close your eyes and ask yourself, where does that sound appear? It's obvious that all sounds appear in you. Is that clear to you?
No, even that's tough.
Okay, close your eyes. Would you agree that the sound and the experience of hearing are identical?
Yes, that is clear.
Okay. So the sound you feel is taking place at a distance from yourself, say 5 meters away from yourself.
Right.
Where is the experience of hearing taking place? How far from yourself?
It's at myself. No
Is
distance.
there any distance between yourself and the experience of hearing?
No.
And what is there to the sound other than the experience of hearing? Is there any part of the sound left over that takes place at a distance from yourself other than the experience of hearing?
Not the sound.
What is it that is taking place at a distance from yourself then?
Some sort. I mean, it's what it feels like is there's some sort of instantaneous construct.
No, you see, we're separating out very clearly here our actual experience of hearing from our ideas or concepts. Now, leave your concepts, what you know or think you know about the sound, and just experience the sound. You've already agreed that all you know of the sound is the experience of hearing, and that the experience of hearing takes place where you are, where I am. Now, something in you feels a little rebellious when you hear that. You feel, but there's something of the sound takes place at a distance from myself. There's something left over.
Something left over is a sense of location of the sound, but then the sense of location of the sound is happening here.
Perfect. So what is actually not happening here? What part of the sound is not happening here?
Yeah, nothing. No part.
Yeah. Unless you refer to memory. If you refer to memory, that is, if you refer to thought, then it seems that the sound is taking place at a distance from yourself. But if you just refer to your direct experience, distance is a construct. You have learnt that the sound is at a distance from yourself. Now take the experience of your hand on the microphone. You experience that as a sensation, yes?
Yes.
Your only knowledge of it. Don't forget, we're leaving thoughts on one side. We're just referring to direct experience. It's a sensation. How many sensations are present there?
Just a sensation.
Just a single sensation. And yet thought would label that sensation hand on microphone. The hand part thought calls me, and the microphone part it calls not me. Mm-hmm. The hand is made out of something that is alive. The microphone is made out of something that is dead. But you've already acknowledged it is only one sensation. So
right.
Is it hand or microphone?
Right. Yeah, no, I see.
Is it me or not me?
I can't differentiate.
There's no line there.
Mm-hmm.
Now open your eyes. You see a collection of objects. People and objects. A collection of things. Is there anything to this collection of objects and people? These objects are all appearing at various distances from yourself, from the point of view of conventional thought. Now, is there anything present in this experience of objects in space other than the experience of seeing?
No.
Where does the experience of seeing take place?
Same place.
And
Here.
is there any part of this room left over outside the experience of seeing? For instance, if you were to remove the experience of seeing, what would remain of the seen objects?
In my experience, nothing.
And what else would there be apart from experience?
My thought.
Okay, thought says there is an object at a distance from myself. But if we ask experience the same question, Experience says, I can't find that object. So which are we going to trust? Our thoughts or our experience?
See, I think you're using thought in a way that maybe I don't use it.
Okay.
Because thoughts to me are images or words.
Okay, images and words. But even the image of this room, where does that image appear? It is made out of imagining. How far from yourself does the experience of imagining take place?
No, it takes place at myself.
At yourself. And where would that place be?
It's placeless.
Exactly. How much space is there in something that is placeless?
Well, either absolutely none or infinite.
Exactly. Now, that understanding doesn't get rid of the appearance of space. I see the appearance of objects in space. But if we make a deep investigation of our experience, we see that the stuff that it is made of is not stuff called matter that exists in space. It's made out of pure knowing, which is consciousness. When you discover that the landscape in the movie is not three-dimensional, you go up to it and you realize it is two-dimensional. That discovery doesn't get rid of the appearance of a three-dimensional landscape. But you are not fooled by that appearance again. You know it's a two-dimensional screen. This is a three-dimensional landscape, a three-dimensional room. But it's what it's really made of, as you have just discovered, has not two dimensions, but no dimensions. It is infinite consciousness. I know this is such a confrontation with the way we've been brought up to think. We've been brought up to think that time and space are the fundamentals of experience, that our experience takes place in something called time and space. No, time and space are constructs. Our experience takes place in something which is not a thing, called consciousness. When the mind disappears, time and space disappears at night. The only time we experience normally the absence of the mind is in deep sleep. There's no time or space in deep sleep. The world is completely folded up into dimensionless consciousness when we fall asleep, because there is no mind there. And then this dimensionless consciousness gives birth to 4 dimensions of time and space in the waking state. We think that the waking state is our primary state, that this is the normal state, and that we go into something called deep sleep and then we come back to the normal state. But actually our primary state is not space and time, it is consciousness. Consciousness is our primary experience. Before you can experience anything, you must be conscious. You must be aware. Consciousness was here first, before time and space. So I'm now just going to give you one more thought to disturb your mind even further. Ask yourself this question: is there any substance present in my experience other than knowing?
No.
How do you know that there is anything other than knowing then?
I don't.
Yeah, ponder that thought. Now, you have never experienced anything other than knowing. I have never experienced anything other than knowing. No one in this room has ever experienced anything other than knowing. No human being has ever, or could ever, or will ever experience anything other than knowing. Consciousness. How do we know that there is something other than knowing? Consciousness. We don't.
Yeah. Everything after that is, you can't say for sure about anything after that.
Except that there is knowing.
Except, yeah, you can say for sure there's knowing.
Yes.
Everything else can't.
And because we can't be sure that there is anything other than knowing, that knowing itself cannot be limited, because there is nothing other than itself to limit itself. We can't even say it's not limited in time, because time is only made of knowing. There is no stuff called time.
Right.
So is there any stuff present apart from knowing that could limit knowing? Look in your experience. Try to find something else apart from knowing that would place a limit on knowing.
Yeah, I can pretty quickly see that's futile.
Yeah.
Because if I find it, I know it, and it's part of knowing.
Exactly. So knowing itself is without limits. Yeah, the stuff your experience is made of is unlimited or infinite knowing. That's all you've ever experienced. And you are that experiences that. The religious name for infinite knowing is God. The one without a second. Infinite being. Everything you have ever experienced is made out of that, or is a facet of that. That's all you need to know. It's all we need to know. If we were to take one fact away, that would be enough. And then we slowly align the way we think, feel, act, perceive, and relate with that fact. That would be enough.
You're the most matter-of-fact teacher I've ever encountered. And you're and also, everything you can direct us to directly look at everything, and you can experientially see. I can experientially see a lot of this. It's also the weirdest shit. It's just when we actually go with it, it is. Yeah, it's. My mind is very disturbed. Thank you.
Thank you.